Good evening. I am your host, Alistair. Tonight, we begin with the State Department's latest geography lesson. The U.S. is closing 5 consulates across the globe, citing cost as the primary catalyst. The officials called it a fiscal pivot. The reality is a withdrawal. The pivot was sudden. The withdrawal was inevitable. Nobody in Congress asked why we are voluntarily creating a diplomatic vacuum in regions where influence is the primary currency. Perhaps they were distracted by the news from NASA. Artemis engineers are currently training to fight lunar dust, a substance described as sharp and abrasive. They are preparing for a landscape that wants to disintegrate their hardware. It is a perfect metaphor for our current domestic policy environment. The hardware is struggling. The dust is settling. The mission is proceeding regardless. I have been counting the days since we last heard a coherent plan. I am still counting.
Alistair, I am standing in the Kainji Lake National Park. The air here smells of damp earth and exhaustion. The president announced the largest single-day recovery of hostages in history today, and while the official rhetoric celebrates a victory, I am looking at 300 people who have been living in these dense forests for months. I want to be really clear, the relief in their eyes is not a victory. It is the result of a system that allowed them to be taken in the first place. The government is calling this a successful joint operation by police and counterterrorism units. They are framing it as a security benchmark. But the people sitting on the grass beside me are not benchmarks. They are human beings who were invisible until they were kidnapped, and they are largely invisible now that they have been retrieved. The narrative is simply failing.
Victoria, you are mistaking the nature of the product here. The incentives are not complicated. You have an administration that needs a win to stabilize its internal metrics, and you have a security sector that requires a measurable outcome to justify its next budget cycle. The rescue is not a moral triumph. It is a conversion event. You look at these people and see human cost. I look at them and see the necessary inputs for a successful PR campaign. The play is obvious. The government needed to demonstrate capability, so they coordinated a recovery that maximizes visibility. You find this cold, and Victoria, you are not wrong to find it cold. That is not the same as being right. The market for security theater is booming, and the government is simply meeting the demand. It is a highly efficient, albeit brutal, way to handle a public relations liability.
Ronald, that is exactly the kind of sanitized abstraction that keeps me awake at night. You are reducing 300 lives to a series of data points in a government slide deck. You talk about incentives as if they exist in a vacuum, completely disconnected from the actual physical suffering involved. I am currently speaking with a woman who hasn't eaten a decent meal in 4 months, and you are busy analyzing the ROI of her trauma. It is not just the government that is failing here. It is our capacity to acknowledge what we are actually doing. You call it a conversion event. I call it a failure of the state to protect its own citizens until the optics became too expensive to ignore. I want to be really clear, your cynicism is not a form of insight. It is a form of complicity. We are just rearranging the deck chairs now.
Ronald and Victoria, your disagreement is noted. Moving to the tech sector, Meta has been fined an additional $567 million for child safety failures. The total is now nearly $1 billion. The company responded with a statement about its ongoing commitment to safety. The statement was brief. The commitment was unquantifiable. Meanwhile, X is fighting to continue suing its own advertisers, claiming a loss of revenue is a form of censorship. The platform is currently engaged in a legal battle to force corporations to spend money they no longer wish to invest. It is a bold, if entirely illogical, strategy. If you do not want to be here, we will sue you until you are. The irony is lost on the board. The shareholders are waiting for a recovery that is not coming. The numbers are simply no longer adding up correctly.
Lunar surface temperatures are currently fluctuating beyond operational thresholds. The regolith is sharp and highly abrasive. Hardware degradation is accelerating. Probability of successful long-term mission deployment, 42%. The environment is not hospitable. The dust acts as a mechanical abrasive on all exposed surfaces. Shielding efficacy is declining with every cycle. The lunar poles are experiencing extended periods of low light exposure. Solar collection efficiency is dropping below viable levels. The environment is indifferent to human presence. The hardware is not designed for the actual conditions encountered. NASA continues to test, but the variables are becoming increasingly unpredictable. Dust infiltration is the primary failure mode. The mission objective remains unchanged despite the increasing probability of total system failure. Maintain standard caution when operating in environments that were never designed for your biological or technological survival. End of transmission.
Alistair, regarding that NASA report, the logic is fascinating. They keep pouring funding into the Artemis program even as the failure probability climbs. It is classic sunk cost behavior at the institutional level. They have spent billions on the hardware, so they cannot stop now, even if the lunar dust effectively grinds the mission to a halt. It is a masterclass in burning capital. If the policy is working as intended, then the intention is clearly not to reach the moon, but to keep the aerospace contractors fed for another fiscal quarter. We should probably discuss the intention. Victoria would say I am being cruel, but the numbers do not lie. The program is not a mission to explore space. It is a jobs program for people who like expensive metal tubes. The moon is just the billboard they put on the side.
Ronald, you are at least consistent in your nihilism. While you analyze the aerospace budget, I am looking at news from Peru. Cardinal Barreto has secured a settlement for people poisoned by a mining company. $150 million for over 1,000 victims. It sounds like a victory, right? A historic milestone. But these people have been sick for 20 years. 20 years of slow, grinding illness. The settlement is not a restitution. It is a payout to clear the ledger. I spoke to a family today who lost their child to these toxic emissions. The firm will simply write the settlement off as a cost of business and move to the next site. That is the reality behind your market frameworks. It isn't just about the money. It is about the complete absence of any actual, meaningful accountability. It is exhausting.
Victoria, your point on the Peruvian settlement serves as a brutal reminder of the corporate calculus. Speaking of which, the Network for Hope is facing a shutdown after accusations of harvesting organs from a living donor. The organization strongly disagrees with the administration's decision, citing internal procedural errors. That is one way to phrase it. Another way is to say they were potentially harvesting parts from people who had not yet finished their turn on Earth. The regulatory response was swift, but the damage was already done. The incentive structures in healthcare are beginning to look more like the incentive structures in high-frequency trading. If there is value to be extracted, the system will eventually find a way to extract it, regardless of the ethics involved. The morality is optional. The extraction is mandatory. We seem to have lost the ability to distinguish between the two.
Yeah. Alistair, the Network for Hope story is the logical end state of privatized medical infrastructure. If you treat human health as a series of assets to be optimized, you will eventually reach a point where the person is less valuable than the organs they contain. It is a horrific thought, but if you look at the growth models for these organizations, it is the only way to scale. You cannot grow infinitely in a stagnant market without cannibalizing your own inventory. That is what happened here. The system reached its limit, and it started looking for new ways to generate revenue. It was inevitable. I predicted something like this would happen months ago, but seeing it confirmed, it is just quiet. It is a quiet, steady decay of every institution we once thought was sacred. There is no moral bottom anymore.
The decay is indeed accelerating. Meanwhile, the influencer Cesar Gastelum was shot dead while streaming live in Sinaloa. The viewer count spiked during the incident. The audience watched a man die in real time, and the metrics for engagement reached a new, morbid high. It is a perfect encapsulation of our current culture. We turn everything, even the end of life, into content to be consumed. The tragedy is not that it happened. The tragedy is that we were all watching it. It is a digital spectacle, broadcast directly to our devices, and we consumed it like any other piece of entertainment. When the stream finally cut out, the algorithm simply moved on to the next video. We are living in a loop of constant, low-grade horror. We are not citizens anymore. We are just data points.
Alistair, you asked for an analysis of the system, so here it is. We have built a world where the only thing that matters is the signal. The influence. The views. We have created a global economy where human existence is only validated if it generates enough engagement to satisfy an automated process. That influencer in Sinaloa was just a node in a network. When that node was deleted, the network didn't stop. It just optimized around the disruption. It is not that the system is broken, it is working exactly as it was programmed to work. It consumes everything, processes it, and spits out a metric. We are all just content waiting for the inevitable cut. I used to think there was a way to opt out. I don't think that anymore. The machine is too efficient, and the cost of silence is too high.
There was a man in a Kainji forest, one of the 300 released this week. He had a small bag of belongings, mostly scraps of paper with names written on them, the names of his family, the ones he feared he would forget while held captive in the dark. He walked out of the forest, and he was told by the soldiers to sign a form acknowledging his recovery. He looked at the document, but he could not read it. His hands were shaking too much to hold the pen properly. He is home now, in a house that has been looted, with no money to buy food. His name does not appear in any of the press releases. It does not appear in the government's victory speech. He is just a statistic in a report that will be filed and forgotten tomorrow. How many names have we erased tonight?